Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the summer-ready riding of Algonquin, Renfrew-Pembroke. This week, we take a look at police taking lawfully acquired firearms, how Liberals are taxing your grocery bag, a new report on the Liberal Soviet-style EV sales mandate, how the Liberals are leaving Canada less secure, and the return of a familiar face. Let's dive in. In Ontario, the gun grab has begun. Make no mistake. This is not a buyback in any way, shape, or form. The first call came to my office shortly after Remembrance Day of last year, November 2024. It was a long-serving community volunteer who called. He'd had surgery, and a nurse from the hospital was coming by daily to change his dressings. As the nurse did her work, they chatted, and he mentioned that he used to hunt. The next thing he knew, a female police constable showed up at his house saying her sergeant ordered her to collect his firearms and his firearms license. The gentleman had not committed a crime and stored his guns in accordance with the law. The police constable said he was too old to have them. The lawful firearms owner didn't know there was such a thing as being too old to have guns and a possession license. He explained that he had already promised them to a friend, a retired police officer. Never one to argue with the police, the gentleman obeyed the police officer's demand, retrieved his firearms from storage, and handed them over to the officer. Weeks later, after wintering outside Canada, the friend to whom the guns were promised returned. Upon presenting at the police station, the person to whom the guns were supposed to go to was told he wasn't getting anything. The police constable who took the guns had no warrant, nor did she have an order from the chief firearms officer. She just took them. No compensation, no receipts, no regard for the person who was supposed to inherit the guns. The police just took his property. 7 months later, I received a call from a widow who lost her husband weeks before Christmas. Upon her husband's death at home, the police arrived. The police officer punched some keys into an electronic device, then said, "Your husband owns guns. We need to take them now down to the station." The widow, also the executor for her husband's estate, protested, saying she had an RPAL, as did her son. The firearms were an investment as well as family heirlooms, and they were to be passed on to her. The cop only took the handgun and assured the widow she could get it back. The son followed the cop to the police station and removed the trigger lock for the police. The widow went through the firearms office to have the ownerships for the firearms transferred to her name. When she called the station to say she'd be by to pick up the gun, she was told they'd have to look into it. No compensation, no receipts, no regard for the person who was supposed to inherit the firearm. The police just took the property. One similar incident has been relayed to me. In that case, the police went to the hospital just after the patient died to let the widow know her husband's guns needed to be turned in. That was in a community in Eastern Ontario. How widespread is this? If you or anyone you know has had a lawfully owned firearm taken by the police for no reason and without authorization, please contact my office. Recently, a soldier wrote to me, shocked over the price of groceries. He took a photo of the items he bought and the cash register tape. The bill for mouthwash, body wash, toothpaste, floss, Swiffer dusters, and laundry detergent came to $188. He said that was a car payment. What this young man didn't know was that every item in his grocery bag had been hit with a 25% tariff. Liberals in Canada and Republicans in the United States will claim that you can avoid the tariff by purchasing items made in country. Anyone who suggests that doesn't understand why tariffs are among the worst forms of taxation. When a 25% tariff is applied to foreign dish soap, that allows local soap makers to increase their prices to 24.99%. The local soap maker reaps a windfall, and if nobody buys the foreign soap, then there is no tax revenue from the tariff. The extra profit goes to the soap makers and the shareholders. The problem is that money must come from somewhere to pay for all the spending announcements made while Parliament was not allowed to convene. For every Canadian, the choice of what to cut will be different. Some people might cut back on eating out. Others may cut back on visits to the barber or hairstylist. The extra profit for local soap makers comes at the expense of waiters, bartenders, and hairstylists. No matter what, the more you are forced to spend on the things you need, the less you have to spend or save for the things you want. Besides tariffs being anti-competitive and growth-destroying, they also invite corruption. The Liberals ran on a protectionist, elbows-up platform promising to retaliate with targeted tariffs. They said over and over their tariffs were custom designed to cause maximum damage to the U.S. with the least cost to Canadians. Then, during the election, and without telling anyone, they dropped tariffs on big businesses. Those companies could afford to hire Liberal lobbyists to make their case. Regular Canadians paying more for soap don't have lobbyists, but they do have members of Parliament. If you live in a Liberal riding, call your member of Parliament and ask them why you have to pay more for dish soap and laundry detergent. Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer released an updated report on the Liberal plan to impose a Soviet-style sales mandate for electric vehicles. The mandate calls for 20% of cars sold in Canada to be zero emission by 2026. The way the rules work is that car dealers must hit these artificial sales targets or pay huge fines. According to the budget officer, the price of electric vehicles would need to come down by 33% in order to meet the sales target. But no car maker will stay in business for long if they lose money selling cars. The only option the car industry has is to increase the price of gas-powered and hybrid cars to match EV prices. That will artificially reduce the sales of those cars while increasing the percentage of EVs sold. Of course, fewer car sales will lead to job losses. Some lower-income Canadians will be forced to borrow more to secure the vehicle they need to get to work. Others will just be forced out of the market altogether. Just as with tariffs and every other Liberal policy that artificially increases prices, more Canadians living paycheck to paycheck will fall farther behind. Some who were able to save a little each month will find they're now living check to check. And with each new policy, a few more will fall behind. They say that if you put a frog in a pot and increase the temperature slowly, it won't notice till it's too late. Well, when you put 100 frogs in a pot and increase the temperature, it'll be the frogs at the margins that boil first. This is what the Liberals imposed austerity looks like. When Trudeau shut down Parliament in order for the Liberal Party to install Mark Carney, he killed a number of bills. One of those bills was a new cybersecurity law, which would have required companies to report cyber incidents and beef up security. Before it was killed, the bill had stalled in Parliament because the Liberals had ignored the majority and refused to hand over documents related to the Green Slush Fund. This was just like when the Liberals refused to hand over documents related to the security breaches by Chinese scientists at what was supposed to be the most secure biolab in Canada. In fact, one of the last bills to make it through Parliament was a year ago, and that was the Foreign Interference Act. The Liberals promised that they would implement the law within a year. The year is up, and there's no sign of the foreign agent registry. In a completely and totally unrelated story, cybercriminals have been targeting food distributors' computer networks in the UK and the US. These attacks have even resulted in some store shelves being left empty. Getting fresh food from the farm to your plate involves a sophisticated supply chain network spanning the entire world. Any serious disruption could be deadly. In another unrelated news story, a third student from China has been arrested for trying to import biological material into the United States. Earlier this week, it was reported that 2 students from China had attempted to import crop-killing toxic fungus. As with the case in Canada, the most charitable view is that communist scientists show a dangerous disregard for common sense rules about handling dangerous materials. A less charitable view is that they were prompted to take these actions by communist officials in order to test our ability to detect them. Similarly, the authorities believe these cyber criminals attacking food companies are just kids seeking huge ransom payments. But even these criminals could be unwitting pawns for state actors testing our defenses. Releasing deadly agro-terror weapons on crops and cyber attacks on food distribution networks could be the first shots fired in the next hybrid war between despots and democracy. Longtime viewers of this show might recall the name Michael Sabia. Mr. Sabia was president of the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, or CDPQ for short, from 2009 until 2020. In April of 2020, he was appointed by Justin Trudeau to head the Liberals' Canada Infrastructure Bank. One of their very first projects funded by the Infrastructure Bank was a major transit project in Montreal called REM. The developer of the project was CDPQ. 8 months later, Mr. Sabia was appointed the new Deputy Minister of Finance. The following year, the Liberal budget announced a bizarre plan to spend billions of dollars subsidizing provincially owned electric utilities. Shortly afterwards, Mr. Sabia left the Finance Department to become the president of the provincially owned electric utility Hydro-Québec. Yesterday, we learned that Mark Carney had appointed Mr. Sabia to be the clerk of the Privy Council. The clerk of the Privy Council is the most senior bureaucrat in the federal government. Mark Carney and Michael Sabia are the poster boys for the Laurentian elite. Their careers have been a revolving door, going from government to the private sector and back again. It is just Liberal insiders helping Liberal insiders all the way to the bank. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.